Trust is the foundation for everything your organization is trying to achieve. With trust, projects end on time and on budget, customers buy more and are willing to pay a premium to buy from a trusted company. Employees are engaged and satisfied with their jobs, turnover, stress levels, absenteeism are low, and the organization is so much more innovative and productive. High-trust companies deliver 5 times higher profits and 286% higher shareholder returns. It's all good. But what does that have to do with the board of directors? In this episode, I will give you 4 ways in which the board can influence the level of trust in the organization, for better or for worse.
Welcome to The Trust Show. I'm Yoram Solomon, your host, the author of the Book of Trust and facilitator of the Trust Habits Workshop. My mission is simple. I want to help you form habits that build your trustworthiness, because the answer to this question will have the biggest impact on your personal and professional success or failure. Can I trust you?
I'm going to start with a story. I served on multiple boards, from boards of a public school system to boards of companies, organizations, professional organizations. And once I served on the board of a professional association. I believe there were about 13 or 14 members of us on the board. And we had an executive director that we had just hired a few months earlier. And that executive director, he had a great promise, but we were not too happy with him. 3-4 months after he started, we were not too happy with him. And so in our board meeting, we had an executive session, which is when you take the executive director or the CEO out of the room, and the board gets to discuss their performance. So we discussed the performance, and board member after board member, we went around the room, and one after the other were not happy with the performance. Well, one board member actually went an extra step and said, we're going to tell him that the board is going to step in and help him. And in case he doesn't get the message, what this means, this is very bad. When the board wants to help the CEO or the executive director, this is a bad sign and he's going to get it. Anyway, we went around the room and obviously pretty much the consensus was we were not happy with his performance. Then we bring him in, and we decided that we're going to go around the room again and everybody's going to give him feedback. Well, the first person starts, and nobody wants the first person to say something negative, so the first person says, yeah, we're pretty happy with your performance. Where did that come from? Then the second person, yeah, you're doing a great job. That's not what we talked 2 minutes ago. And it got to that one director that said the board is going to help you. And what she said was, by the way, we talked about that and the board is willing to help you in your job. Now, at that point, the executive director is happy. I mean, he's smiling ear to ear because the board is willing to help. At that point, that was a little too much for me. And I was one of the last ones to go, but I said, I'm sorry. What are we doing? When he was not in the room, we said something completely different. I mean, this comment here, that the board is going to help, the way it was said was that the board is going to step in and help you do your job, and this is a very bad sign for you. That's not how we delivered it. Now, I'm not going to talk about now body language and the tone of voice and the fact that it was different body language and tone of voice, because you can get that from other episodes in this podcast when I talk about intimacy and time, the components of trustworthiness. But it was just that we delivered something completely different. And we didn't have a relationship with the executive director that would make him understand that we are not happy. So we were really setting him up for failure. In a future episode, I'm going to talk about how to give feedback and how to take feedback. Give feedback like you care, and take feedback like it matters. But for this, at this point, I just want to say that That executive director did not speak to me for about 6 months. I mean, we had to have a relationship as me being on the board and he being the executive director, but it was cordial and that's where it ends. He would not talk to me beyond that. It took him about 6 months to one day call me and have dinner with me and tell me, you know what? It just hit me that your feedback and the fact that you turned that meeting around gave me what I needed to be a better executive director. And in the close to 10 years I've been on that board, he ended up being the best executive director we ever had. That's the type of relationship that you need with your board, with your CEO, with the executive director of the organization that you're on the board of.
If you like this video, click the like button, subscribe to this channel, and get notified when I release more videos like this.
Let me start with why is trust important to your company? Your company has multiple stakeholders. So I'm going to start with the customers. There have been so many shady practices, marketing and sales, that cause really customers to not trust the company. And as a result, they're only willing to work and buy from companies that they really, really trust. And they're willing to even pay a premium today. And in one of my surveys, I found that the premium is about 29.6%. So they're willing to pay a higher price if they buy from a trusted company. Not a company that says that it's trusted, but from a company that they can really trust. So that's customers. How about shareholders and stakeholders? I've seen reports coming from the National Association of Corporate Directors, NACD, that says that shareholders trust companies, or it's very important to them that the companies adopt DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, and CSR, corporate social responsibility. And these are really important to them. But let me ask you a question. Yes, this is important. We trust a company that deploys DEI and CSR practices, good DEI and CSR practices. But does that mean that we don't care about profitability anymore? We don't care about share price? We don't care about earning to price ratios? That's not the case. We do care about them. And so when we need to trust a company, when the shareholders trust a company, it's not just these things. I would even tell you that it's relative, but I'll get to that. Your employees. The employee, it's not really your employees, you're the director, it's the CEO's employees, but the employees, they enjoy their jobs. They have higher levels of engagement, and they like what they do. They would recommend the company to other employees. Less stress, less absenteeism. All of those are important for the company to actually be creative and innovative and productive. So it's really important for your employees to feel that there's trust in the company, that they're trusted, that they can trust others. Then we get to company performance. There is a lot of research done by me, by others, that showed the correlation between the level of trust, the level of innovation. And high innovation companies, highly innovative companies, deliver 5 times the profit. 286% higher shareholder returns, as I said in the introduction. They finish projects on time and on budget 45% better than companies with low trust, than project teams with low trust. And those are all things that you care about. You care about the customers, that the customers trust the company. You care about the level of trust within the companies, between employees and management, and the performance of that company. Those are all things that you care about. And this is why trust is so important to your organization. Whether you're a for-profit, non-profit, industry association, or a public school system. So this whole episode is about your role as a board member in building trust in the company, or having a high level of trust. So I'm going to start, I told you that I'm going to give you 4 things. I'm going to start with the first one. The first one is your role in governance. You provide governance. What does that mean? You set policies. The part that you must do as a director to build trust in the company is make trust a priority. you need to communicate it really, really clearly to the CEO, to the executive director, that trust is a priority for you as a board, as an individual board member, part of the entire board. Trust is a priority, not just by words, not just say, I want you to be able to say that we're trusted, but actually say, look, trust is important. It's a priority for us. The second part that you play is oversight. And by oversight, you typically, as your part as a board member, you look at metrics. What are the type of metrics that you look at? You look at, historically, you look at things like profitability. You look at revenue. You look at revenue growth. You look at turnover. Those are certain metrics that, as a board, you typically ask the executive director or the CEO to provide you with. You need to ask for trust metrics. What is the level of trust? Now, in a different episode, I'm going to talk about how you measure trust, because trust is kind of one of those vague, abstract constructs that's kind of hard to measure. There is no measurement, a direct measurement. Look at trust as a black box, and this is the very, very short version. Look at trust as a black box with inputs and outputs. You can measure the inputs, which are the leading indicators that you will have trust. If those exist, you will have trust. Look at the outputs, the behaviors, the symptoms of trust. Those are the trailing indicators. If we have trust, we're going to see them. You can look at the inputs, you can look at outputs, and determine whether you have trust or not. So in your role as providing oversight to the company, make sure that there are trust metrics. Establish a baseline, set the goals, and keep monitoring that every board meeting or within your role as a board member. Third is the relationship that you have with the CEO. I can't tell you how many boards I've been on where the relationship with the CEO or the board meeting where the CEO presents and sometimes other executive VPs present is a show. I mean, we're going to show you what we think you want to see, whether it's reality or not, whether it's connected or disconnected from reality. I can tell you that I've been on a board where we found out one day that the executive director forgot to make sure that the board is still in good standing with the state that the organization was in. So you want to have a trusting relationship with the CEO. And it works both ways. You need to trust the CEO enough to give the CEO autonomy. I like Teresa Amabill's definition of autonomy. It's not letting the CEO decide. I'm adopting it. Not letting the CEO decide which mountain to climb. This is something you have to agree with them. And this is part of your direction in setting policy. But you need to let the CEO decide how to climb the mountain. But it needs to work the other direction as well. The CEO needs to trust you too. And I know that it sounds kind of counterintuitive. What do you mean? We're the board. We need to trust him. We don't trust him or her. We're going to replace them. But it's actually the other way around. The CEO must trust you enough to be able to share bad news, to be able to say, I don't know, to be able to take advice, to be able to say, I was wrong. Now, I'm not saying that accepting failure should be celebrated. It should be accepted as long as the CEO, the executive director, learns from mistakes, learns from failure. So there has to be trust between you and the board and the CEO, you, the board, and the CEO, and it has to work in both ways. So the last one, the fourth one, is that you as a board, you set example. Your behavior, if you trust each other, if there is a high level of trust on the board, and the symptoms of that would be a constructive disagreement, your arguments, the way you interact with one another, this spills over to the rest of the company. The CEO sees that, the executive director sees that. The executive team, whenever they see the board, they interact with the board and they see that you have a high level of trust within that board. And I've worked with boards on building that level of trust. I can tell you, by the way, the hardest boards to work with, school districts or any other boards that are made of elected officials that are elected to their position by other people who are not here. But in any board, your behavior within the board spills over to the executive team, from them to the rest of the company. And strong companies, high trust companies, it spills over to the customers and customers will buy from you with all the other effects. So it's not just saying that it's DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or CSR, corporate social responsibility, or anything else. It's relative. It's made of many, many other things, and it's your role. So in summary, trust is relative. It's not just those components of DEI, CSR, or any specific value. Those are values. Values are important, and they're important to establish trust. But there are other things, such as competence. And I'm going into my model of trust habits, the 6 component models. They apply to an individual, they apply to a group of people, they apply for the company. It's competence, shared personality, compatibility, that includes shared values, and symmetry, that includes fairness, and it includes what the company does and how it interacts, or how people interact, through positivity, time, and intimacy. And I want you to know that your 4 rules, first of all, are in governance, in demanding that trust is a priority for the company, in oversight, in asking and reviewing metrics, trust metrics, in your relationship with the CEO, the trusting relationship with the CEO, both directions, up and down, and in how you behave as a board, the level of trust as the board that spills over to the rest of the company. And I wanted to just end with keep in mind that what I'm teaching you here, what I'm telling you here, applies not only to you in your role as a director, it applies to your role within your own company, your role within your family, and with your friends. I hope this was helpful.
This is the shorter video version of the Trust Show podcast. You can listen to the full episode anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts.